February is considered to be the month of love. Our news feeds filled with advice on how to find a match, being with a better partner, how to keep love and find love.
Yeah, but what do you focus on? What we don't know focus nearly on as much is the need to first love ourselves. So joining us today to help us learn to love and accept ourselves more is Master Life Coach and host of How to Be a Dangerous Woman podcast, Dr. Crystal Connor. First of all, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, ladies.
All right, so you are going to give us some tips on how to show ourselves more compassion and how to really start falling in love with ourselves. But first, can you explain what is self-love and why is it even important?
Self-love is having a really high regard for yourself. It is having a high regard for your joy, your overall well-being, but it's also accepting yourself and showing yourself kindness and respect. And if you think about it, if you think about the way that we treat people or things that we don't really like and that we don't really care for versus how we treat people that we love, there's a big difference, because when you love yourself, it affects the way that you make decisions. It affects the way that you treat yourself, and it accepts what you allow to come in and out of your life. So it's really important.
It really is. So who should practice self-love? Because we're not just talking about single people when we talk about this, right?
No, everybody needs to practice self-love. It is so important because it not only impacts you, but it impacts how you show up in the world. So meaning it impacts your relationships, it impacts your career, it impacts how you show up every day in your interactions with people. So everyone should attempt to love themselves more and more every day.
Okay, so what are some reasons that someone may lack self-love?
The number one reason people lack self-love is because they are believing these negative self-beliefs. So these thoughts that you have thought about yourself for years and years and years, to the point where they become beliefs. And it comes from things we were told in childhood, things people said to us, things that we picked up, but they become beliefs in who we think we are. And then we compare ourselves to others. So we start measuring up where we fall in the scale of worthiness. And we set these unrealistic and unexpected standards that we can't live up to for ourselves, and it makes us feel unworthy, and we don't love ourselves as much as we could.
Oh, it's so true. If we could only get a kind of a transcript of things that we have rolling around our head all the time, right? So
right.
What are some of the practical ways to begin to show ourselves a little more compassion and love?
I think one of the most practical ways, because we talk to ourselves more than anybody else during the day, from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed. Yeah. And so it's really important to monitor the things that you're saying to yourself. We're so quick to say things and not think about the negative impact it has on how we feel about ourselves. So really monitoring how you speak to yourself, learning how to speak up for yourself, learning how to set boundaries and say, this is what I'm available for, this is what I'm not available for. And then just learning how to have compassion for yourself and starting to tear down and challenge all those long-standing beliefs that you have about yourself and creating new ones.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that self-compassion. It's on the list, but that's something that some people really struggle with. Why do you think that is?
The reason people struggle with self-compassion is because of those negative self-beliefs. So like Tamsin was saying, if we could get a transcript, which we can, of all the things that we're thinking, then we would understand why we don't think we're worthy of self-compassion. So if we're believing these negative things about ourselves, then we're telling ourselves, I'm not worthy of compassion and grace and patience. And so we don't give that to ourselves.
Oh, so true. So I have a question for you about this. How do you prevent self-love, which I don't think it happens that often, but it can happen, from becoming selfishness?
Yes. The way to prevent self-love from teetering over into selfishness is to consider other people. We can take that whole main character energy, but we also need to consider that our choices affect and impact other people. And so while you don't have to make decisions based on other people, you do need to be aware of the impact that it makes when you do make decisions. And I think if we can just encourage other people to do their own self-love practices, we'd all be better off.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Dr. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us today and reminding us of how important it is to love ourselves.
Thank you so much, ladies.
All right. For more life tips, you can go to drcrystalconnor.com or follow her on Instagram or TikTok at Dr. Crystal Connor.